When it comes to waging a successful local revolt, it's all about getting back to the basics and removing ourselves from the system that's no longer serving us. We can begin to remove ourselves from the corporatocracy's disease-for-profit food system by eating healthy, natural, and locally grown whole plant foods. When we were in Houston, we met Danny Wilson at Farm Dirt and learned how healthy soil and compost, free from animal byproducts, can set the foundation for some really nutrient-rich foods. Today, we'll hear the story of a pretty incredible family farm in North Carolina who has taken this theory and put it to the test. It's called Flow Farm, and in today's episode, we'll learn how they did what they were told simply couldn't be done. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Austin Haynes with the Waking Justice Project. In today's podcast, we'll interview a true revolutionary who's making evolutionary change in their community. Resilient communities are the core building blocks of a just and sustainable global society. And the foundation of a resilient community is a just and sustainable local food economy. It's why the global revolution starts at home, at local farms and community gardens, at grocery co-ops and local food hubs, in your own garden, in your kitchen, and on your plate. The local food supply chain is the foundation of a self-reliant community, and resilient, self-reliant communities are the core building blocks of a just and sustainable new society, a new social system that will make this existing system of corruption obsolete. That is the revolution we seek. The real revolution is a strategic, non-violent revolution. It builds self-reliance and community resilience. The real revolution is a local revolt. My guest today is the mastermind behind a veganic farm in Aberdeen, North Carolina called Flow Farm, where he and his family have transformed their land from a pine forest with a largely depleted sandy soil where fruits and vegetables would barely grow to a thriving organic family farm, not only providing nutrient-rich foods for their community, but also improving the soil, air, and water quality around them. Welcome to the podcast today, Mark Epstein.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll just dive right in. I'll just ask you right off tops, how did you get into farming?
Well, it kind of all started back in my family, probably going back to my grandmothers on both sides. They were both big organic farmers in the 50s and 60s and big organic gardeners. They had fruit trees and they had grapes and always had a big garden. And then in my family, I was growing up as a little kid in New York, and I remember we always had a garden in the backyard there that was in Long Island. And then I spent most of the rest of my growing up in Florida, and we had mango trees.
Cool.
So after I went to college and then kind of really started thinking about stuff, I really wanted to get my hands in the dirt. And so I spent most of my college and afterwards in Chicago. And then we bought this land down here in North Carolina. So we're in the middle of North Carolina in an area, Aberdeen is about an hour and a half south of Raleigh. And we are called the Sandhills of North Carolina. So I wasn't really used to really growing fruits and vegetables, but I wanted to have this hobby and really learn about it. So we built some raised beds, and local horse guy brought over some compost, and we planted about 30 fruit trees and started kind of this project. And I put up a small little, mini greenhouse, and we started planting stuff, and stuff grew great. It was just, he brought us over really good soil and stuff grew great. And we had cleared up enough space inside where we were living. There were some trees, big trees around the perimeter. And the first couple of years, we had wonderful gardens, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And so as time goes on, you deplete the soil because when you're harvesting food and taking plants out of the soil, you're taking nutrients with them. Unless you're replenishing it and thinking about it consciously, then your soil is going to slowly degrade. But the other part that I didn't think about is that when you cut down some trees and create your raised beds and do this stuff, the trees around the perimeter have more sunlight and they just get bigger. And so within a few years, the tree canopy started coming in. And whereas I used to have lots of sun back there, every year we'd have less and less and less sun. So my wife and I, we had our first child, and we were having our second child, and we kind of like said, we want to have a bigger house and, and kind of like more space. And the house we were living in was, we really didn't plan it all out. So we kind of like got an opportunity to buy 5 acres right across the street. And we actually were able to get another 10 acres in the forest adjacent. So we got a total of about 15 acres over here. Cool. And because we weren't in a rush, we said, let's develop the new place while we're living at the old place. And I cleared out space for the farm because I knew I needed to clear out enough trees. It was mostly pine, but we also have hardwood all through here. And I knew that when I was clearing out trees, I wanted to, give enough space that the sun would still be able to really get to our fields. So that's when it all started. That was probably about 12 years ago or so. Okay. And I had this plan that we were going to grow. I grew up in a very healthy, vegetarian-centered family. We followed plant-based teachings and called natural hygiene back in that time. And so we really focused on healthy food. And so I wanted to grow for my family just the healthiest, nutrient-rich foods that I could figure out how to grow. Sure. And so I started reading books about soil, and I started to, research some on the internet and search for stuff. And I just plain started. And I remember I met our local agricultural extension agent, and I told him what my plan was, and we were going to have a farm here and everything. And he said that it would be hard pressed. We're in Moore County. He said, it'd be hard pressed to find a worse piece of land anywhere in Moore County. Wow. And all of Moore County is sugar sand. I mean, we are really the sand hills. And so he was saying, like, you can't do it. Can't be done. You could grow blueberries, you could, grow pines, you could grow magnolias. I mean, that's what you can do. Or you can really bring in chemicals, and you can do tobacco and cotton and soybeans and like other people. Yeah. So that's kind of how it all started, is that I just wanted to grow super healthy food. And so my journey began at that point. And he told me it wasn't going to be easy. And you have to give nature time. But if you bring in the right environment, the right ingredients, the right kind of respect for the soil that you're doing, and you think about it as what we're doing is we are, offering our skills to really develop the healthiest soil. The plants come after that. The plants, if you give them the environment, the plants know what to do. Exactly. Yeah. So that's how we got started. We didn't know what we were doing, but I did read a lot. I'd get so many books, and there were certain books that became kind of my inspiration. Like one year it might be this, or one year it might be that. But I developed my kind of philosophy of the soil really pretty early on. My background is as a mathematician, so I'm not like an organic chemist or a soil scientist or a farmer. Sure. But I looked at our sandy soil, and we did soil tests, and he was right. We did we went down a couple feet, and we saw what we had. What we had was basically, it's not the same everywhere, but we had about 6 to 12 inches of sugar sand, which means that it's primarily sand with a small amount of organic matter and other minerals mixed in, but it's not particularly great. And it used to be a forest floor, but when the forest goes, so does all the organic matter. And then just below there, hard red clay. So that's not, because that means when the water comes down, it's going to pool on the hard red clay. It's really bad. So I had to start learning stuff. And I knew from our soil tests that if we don't have enough nutrients, like if we don't have a wide range of nutrients for these plants, if a tomato plant's growing, how does it build that stem? How does it build those leaves? How does it build those tomatoes? And if we want to give the tomato plant the materials that it needs in its wisdom to build this greatest, healthiest, nutritionally complete tomato, if there's no, let's say, manganese in my soil, the tomato's not going to get any manganese. It's not going to make it. If there's no boron, if there's no whatever isn't there. So I knew that we needed to bring in a wide variety of micronutrients and macronutrients. Yeah. So when I was reading about stuff, one of the first things we did was to bring in kelp meal off the Maine coast. We brought in pallets of kelp meal, and we also brought in pallets of azomite, which is a volcanic dust that has a very wide range of micronutrients. Yeah. So at this point, I'm still living in my mind. I hadn't yet made the jump from a chemistry experiment to a biological system. And so I said, all right, we don't have all the nutrients. Let's bring in what we need.
Okay.
And for macronutrients, I used, like, for instance, calphos is a ground rock dust. And so we use lots of different rock dusts and stuff, and you mix it and you put them in there. So now you might have all the nutrients, the whole wide range of spectrum that you need, and you might even have the right pH and things like that. But the plants that you want to grow need to be in a living system. And I didn't quite know that yet. But the other part of the puzzle, as I was learning about it, was carbon. So we need, right now more than ever on our planet, we need like active sequestration of carbon into our soils. We need our planetary experience of carbon moving into the soil. And I knew, and I had this idea in my mind, that carbon was the fabric that built soil. And as I was reading about stuff, I learned that carbon in the soil will hold on to other nutrients from chemistry. Okay. And the kind of carbon that I was learning about was called biochar. Yeah. And I know that there's a place out near Asheville that makes biochar, and I wanted to learn to make biochar. And so I researched some, and I found actually a small veganic farm in France that had written some essays about their soil and their permaculture approaches and the things that they were doing. And they talked about how being able to make biochar and including biochar in what they were doing was like crucial. So I had this idea that biochar is a really crucial thing. And then when I learned a little bit about how carbon holds on to all the different nutrients and holds on to the moisture and stuff, that was a good thing. And one of the key points in North Carolina is, as you know, we used to be the ocean. The ocean used to be over here. And we are this rainforest ecosystem. And I don't remember where I read it exactly, but apparently east of the Mississippi, like our ecosystem throughout North Carolina is like the most diverse ecosystem outside of like the Amazon rainforest, like anywhere. We have this massive rainforest style ecosystem, but we kind of cut it all down in the last 200 years for the Industrial Revolution. Sure. And so, but we have this incredible ecosystem here. But that's because we get too much rain. When you get too much rain, what that means is that all of the rain that's coming down, it's hitting leaves, it's hitting soil, it's hitting ground, it's doing all the stuff. And if you get more rain than can be incorporated into the surface ecosystem, or be resident on the leaves and on the grass and in the organic matter as moisture for a while so it can evaporate back up to the air. If you get too much, then all that water's got to go down. And on its journey down, as it's going through the soil and going down all the way to the water table, wherever that is, anything that can dissolve in water, all those nutrients are going down with it to the water table. So when we think about soil nutrients, and maybe one of my favorites is like gypsum. Gypsum is calcium sulfate. And it's a wonderful, nutrients dense, great thing to have in your soil, but it dissolves in water. So if you add that to your soil because you know it's a good thing to do, you kind of get into the requirement that you have to add it every year. Calphos, and that's why farmers think you got to add all of these fertilizers every single year. Not just to replenish what you're taking away, but because it's all going to leach away and go down into the water table. And that's where I learned about biochar and how important that is. And so in a healthy soil, it's spongy and it's got chemistry working and biology working and all this stuff working, and it holds on to the nutrients instead of them being drawn down to the water table. So I knew that I needed to invent things, learn things that were going to really be about causing our soil to become a rich fabric of organic matter, rich in carbon, and give it the whole breadth of nutrients that it needs. And if we do that, then you plant the plants and they're just going to love it. Sure. So that was kind of the journey to kind of like say, to go from sand to healthy organic soil, we need to get all the nutrients. We need to get carbon as the fabric to hold it together. We need to get organic matter in there. And then that, we'll get into the next discussion about no-till. It was kind of like this journey for me to go from a soil test that's really to a large extent about chemistry and kind of then evolve to like understanding the miracle that is the biology, the microbiology of soil. Yeah. Okay, so 12 years ago, you started messing around with all this stuff. You're using raised beds, right?
mainly?
Originally, I was using raised beds, but then we shifted, and now we're doing raised rows.
Raised rows. Okay.
Yeah. So, for instance, if you were to go out into my fields, my fields are about 70 feet long, just because of we have about 2 acres inside the deer fence, and where the trees were that we wanted to keep as part of our perimeter. Our fields are 70 feet long. At the beginning, they were kind of like all different things, and we learned that standardizing some of the geometry can really help in efficiency.
Okay.
Also, when we're doing field rotations, we have 8 fields, and as what we're growing in each field is moving around for 8 years, things are going to be in different places until it gets back to where it was. And so if each field has a different geometry to it, then the idea of what you're going to do next year is now different than what you did this year. And so it took us a few years to realize this very simple thing, but we decided that all of our geometries needed to be really similar. And so our fields happen to be about 70 feet long.
Okay.
The planting surface where we're going to plant our tomato plants or okra or whatever we're going to be growing, those are 2.5 feet wide. And then our walking path in between each of these beds is 2 feet. So 2.5 feet and 2 feet. And the 2.5 feet is, we don't walk on it. We let it really be uncompressed. We let it really build its organic matter and its life, and we let it be, as healthy and as growing as it can be. And so we only walk on the walking paths. And when you kind of prepare your bed for planting, we add things to the surface. So if I want to add a little bit of an amendment or add something, we're adding it to the surface. So we have each year kind of this process where our soil's getting taller in those beds, but also each year we have gravity, and gravity is bringing it down. And so we're kind of lifting it up through adding stuff, and then gravity brings it down. One of the things that we sometimes do is we have a tractor, a walk behind tractor called a BCS tractor, and the handles move so you can stand in the walking path and have the tractor wheels straddle the beds. And there's different attachments that can add. At the beginning, we used our tiller attachment, and we were like, whoa, if we're going to have like gorgeous, healthy, fluffy beds, we better till them, and then we can put our plants in or our seeds in, and it's going to be wonderful. And it does make it fluffy, but we can talk about it as we get into regenerative ag a little bit. It's really dramatically destructive to the soil. Yeah. So when that became clear, you look back in life and the journeys that you're on, it should have been clear to me on day one, but it wasn't. Life is a process. And so when it became clear to me, it was like, aha, like this is obvious. So now if you're going to be in this space where you say, we don't go in and pulverize and destroy the top 6 inches each time we're going to plant something, then you have to come up with new strategies, new plans. Yeah. And so for us, as I say, we're adding things to the surface, but we want them to be related to the soil. We're adding things that would like to be in the soil. So we use a manual technique called a broad fork, where it's these deep kind of slicing knives that go down into the soil. They go down about 14 inches, and you rock it back and forth. So if we add our biochar and some amendments, and our largest source of nitrogen for us on our farm, regular organic farms look to animal products for their nitrogen, whether it's manures or blood meal or feather meal or all this stuff. And since we don't use any of those things, our primary source of nitrogen has to be plants. And we use organic alfalfa meal as our regularly applied nitrogen source. Okay. And so if I'm going to add, let's say, 1/8 of an inch of organic alfalfa meal to the surface of the bed, and it's going to provide a nutrient nitrogen boost for, 6 months or something, slow release in a real natural decomposing kind of way, I don't want it just to sit on the surface. I want it to kind of be part of the whole soil and kind of move around. And so by going through with these broad forks and slicing down, we're creating air paths, and the stuff that we had on the surface kind of stratifies and kind of goes down a little bit. So instead of us tilling 6 inches and mixing it all up, all we do is like slice holes and let it kind of fall in there. And then the soil biology takes care of it for us. Wow. Yeah. So, and then when we add our compost or mulches or things, those would go on even higher. And so by continually building, I mean, that's what soil is. Soil is not supposed to be disrupted in the way that commercial modern big ag does it, and that we've all learned how to do it.
Sure.
You do things. I mean, we're putting plants where we want them. We are disturbing the soil, but by approaching it as like something that's like where we have respect for the soil, we're reverent. The soil is a miracle that sustains us that we don't even understand, then we should walk lightly. And so mixing it up is not walking lightly. It's killing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, I haven't learned about no-till and these types of methods till very recently. I mean, I always did the exact same thing. And honestly, earlier this year when I was planting my garden, I didn't know about no-till yet. So I don't have a big space, but I went in and I got my shovel and I just mixed everything up, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Right, exactly.
That's just what I've been taught over the years. Now I'm learning more about that. And I also, when I was doing this, I had no idea about the microbiome and how your soil should be living. Like, I had no concept of any of this. I just thought dirt grew food.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like you were saying too, like, I didn't know about the nutrients, like that. If it didn't have something like manganese or whatever, that wouldn't be in your food. Like,
right.
I just had no idea about any of this. So it's all so interesting to me. It's like, it's really opened up a whole new world, like a whole new world. It's kind of exciting, actually. So yeah, I'm just following along with your journey. And so you learned about biochar, and you also learned that you wanted your soil to be living. So y'all, do you make your own compost as well?
Yep. So when we think about living soil, there's bacteria, there's like, they say there's like billion in a single teaspoon of like healthy real soil. There's like a billion organisms, and they all live in this symphony that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the documentary Fantastic Fungi.
No,
about
not
Paul
yet.
Stamets, and it's such a wonderful documentary. But to understand the fungal fabric and the mycelium network that lives under the soil, when we start crunching it all up, it's not there anymore, And so when we have healthy soil biology, they maintain their balance. And so sometimes maybe you get a lot of rain and there's not much air down there because all the channels got filled up with air, with rainwater. Well, that's a phase where the anaerobic bacteria kind of like bloom and like become really like, hey, this is exactly what I want. And the fungal relationships and all that kind of develop, and how the communication and all that works. And then let's say it dries out a little bit. And so now it's drying out a little bit. Well, guess what? The aerobic microbiology start really kind of being the predominant behavior. And so the soil is kind of in this breathing life and all this stuff. So now let's say you have a plant. Maybe you just grew a lettuce, or you grew something and you harvested it. And now you want that plant to not be there anymore because you got something coming next. So in the old fashioned way, you might harvest it and take out all the roots. You might come in there and till it and try and kill the roots. You don't want these plants to be coming back if you want to have like a fresh start for your next crop. But those decaying plant roots, the stems, all of that stuff that's down under the ground, that has this fully developed relationship with the organic microbiology that's down there. So when that seed sprouts, so here's the way I think about it. You put let's say you're going to grow a pea. You take that pea and you put it in the ground.
Yep.
And it's got, the right temperature, let's say, and the right darkness and the right moisture and the right environment. And it says, time to wake up. And it wakes up and it sends up a little shoot that's coming up. And this shoot going up, his job is to find the sun. And it comes up above the soil and the dicot leaves open up and it's got its little solar panel going. Until it can really get going, it's got the seed has a certain amount of energy for it. It knows not only what kind of plant it's going to turn into, but it's the initial energy. But it also puts down a taproot. And the taproot starts off going down straight, and then the hairs come off. And then the hairs get bigger, and then there's hairs on the hairs and hairs on the hairs. And it creates connections to everything that's happening in the soil there. And so they say that if you go and dig deeper and tinier and tinier and tinier, it's like you can't quite tell when the roots, the tiny little hairs on that roots end and stop being root hairs and start being your soil life. It's like they merge. They do like the total meld. So now all that's living down there in this totally amazing symphony of relationships. And the plant says, hey, I need some manganese, and the soil biology says, sure, I'll give you some manganese. And the plant says, I know how to get sunlight and I can bring down carbohydrate energy for you. And it puts that into the soil, and they have this whole relationship. Well, when you cut down that plant, or let's say you're a deer walking by and you just eat the plant, when the plant, the top of it is cut away from the bottom half, what's going to happen to those roots? Those roots are going to decay. They're going to become the food for the entire soil biology. And as they decay, they leave air space, they leave their skeletal structure, the entire thing. I mean, that's the ebb and flow of the annual process, everything. Wow. And so if we work with that, and like say, when we harvest something, we're going to leave all of that food and all of that life there to be reincorporated, to be repurposed by the soil biology. That's how we keep feeding the soil. That's how we keep building healthier and healthier soil. And the early thing that I heard, at the very beginning, when we said, we're going to build this farm and it's going to be veganic, you know, and people would say, well, do you want any of our, horse manure? I'm like, no, I don't. Do you want any of our chicken manure? No, actually, I don't. And it's like, well, how can you be a farmer if you're not doing that? You got to take in all these manures and stuff. And that's when I read about chapters in books. They call them green manure. Yeah. So a green manure is a plant that is a cover crop. So it's going to cover the soil and protect the soil, and it's going to grow. And its purpose is to bring nutrients and life and everything into the soil in a way that decomposing manure provides a certain kind of benefit for the soil. Okay. The green manures are doing it, like we don't have to give this clover and alfalfa to a horse or a cow to eat and then poop it out. Let's just let it decompose itself. And so so green manure cover crops, are a big piece of what we talk about as regenerative ag.
Why do most people not know about it?
Well, I think that the awakening of the role of cover crops is becoming profound right now across not just our country, but the whole world, is that if you look out at a field, that you're driving through Iowa or you're looking out at a big field and it just is dead, and you see the big tractors coming through and the dust storms and all this stuff, and they're growing corn and they're growing soybeans and they're growing food. Well, how do they do it? They till up the soil and they get the seeds in the ground, and they got machines that'll do that for them. Yeah. And then the seeds are in the ground, and then they gotta get a lot of water. They have to use an enormous amount of water. And then they come in with all these chemicals to provide the nutrients. And so they do all these sprays of fertilizer and all this stuff. And if they're an organic farm where they're not using certain kinds of chemical fertilizers that are not considered natural, then they're going to come in with big tanks of manures, and they're going to spread all this stuff all over their fields, and the seeds will sprout. And then, if again they're chemical agriculture, they're going to say, but not only are our seeds going to sprout, but all the weeds are going to sprout. So now we got to put in all kinds of things that are going to kill the plants that we don't want to have there. And it's basically like growing plants doing in like this violent way where the soil is not actually, supportive of the plants. And so we're going to use our creativity as scientists and say, all right, well, let's just give them all these chemicals and let's do all this stuff to kill everything that we don't want around there, whether it's bugs or whether it's weeds or plants that, we're going to do all this stuff and we're going to win. We're going to win. And it's a very, kind of fractionated approach to life.
It sounds like they went to war with the soil or with their environment, basically.
Exactly. And this has been going on since the 40s, after World War II, the chemical industry became so entwined with big ag. So it's a disaster. It's totally not supporting the soil. But the consequences is that you get more complex weeds, you get more complex bugs, you have to use more and more and more expensive chemicals. And even if you ignore the impact to the health of the plant and the health of the consumer that's going to eat the plant, or if you're growing food to feed to animals and then people are going to eat the animals, it's got every place you look, it's totally unnatural. And that's what's happened to Big Ag, is Big Ag has been driven by looking how to do things more efficiently from a cost perspective, looking how to manage risk, and not having to put into their economic model the side effects, the externalities, like there's no more fresh water, or all the soil is dead, or all the carbon is gone from the soil. Or everybody that works in downstream, has a higher likelihood of getting cancer or reproductive problems. It's like they don't have to pay for all these side effects. They're a single kind of minded corporation doing what single-minded corporations do.
Yeah.
But I think now the corporations and certainly the communities, we have a new generation, and people are more conscious consumers, and people are more, voting and participating with their voice on the things that they believe. They're not just participating with their voice to say, like, how can I, make the most money next week, And I think that Big Ag is slowly becoming aware. But I think it's that whole middle layer of ag that's like saying, yes, it's not about growing the most number of pounds of something at the least cost, where we abuse not only the environment, but the people and everything else. It's about looking at a more holistic system. And that's where we see biodynamics and permaculture and these regenerative ag practices coming back into life, and people have to relearn these things. These are things that have been out of the typical farmer mentality for a long time, especially these big mega farms.
Sure.
So I'm just going to give a plug right now. I'm really inspired by the work of Kiss the Ground. And so it's a documentary about how we can approach respect for the soil and regenerative practices that are going to solve not only climate change crucial issues, but the health of the soil, the health of the people, the health of the communities. And so their film is coming out. It's actually being deployed, made available on Netflix. It's going to have massive viewing, like in the next 24 hours.
Awesome.
And I think people are going to be really inspired by it. But they speak about all of these regenerative practices in the same way that I learned over the last 12 years.
Cool. So yeah, everybody, by the time this comes out, Kiss the Ground will be out. So everybody go check that out. And,
definitely. I need to tell you about our compost.
Yeah, yeah.
So why is compost important? That's like the first question, when you go into any kind of like thoughtful, books by mentors that are like, telling you how to be a healthy farmer, going back to the 60s or now, or going back even to the way before then, they all always like focus on compost as like this crucial thing. And they also there's kind of a mystery of it, it's like, oh, well, if you make your compost this way, it's good compost. But if you didn't do it right, it might not do the right thing for you. So it has this whole air of complexity to it, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I did not realize this at the beginning when I started my farm. Yeah. I did not know this. And so I knew that I was going to grow green cover crops and let them decompose into the soil. But I didn't realize at the beginning how the tilling that I was doing for the first 5 years or so was kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing, and sometimes 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And so I just didn't know yet. But the thing is that soil is so much about the organic living biological system. And so when you make compost is the decaying process of organic matter. You can think of it as plant matter or waste matter, organic matter, carbon-rich matter, mixing with nitrogen-rich matter, and becoming, nitrogen is the fuel source, and becoming, this alive stuff. So everything that you can think about, tiny microscopic stuff, whether it's fungus, whether it's molds, whether it's bacteria, whether it's, bigger stuff like, little tiny worms and nematodes and bigger worms and beetles, all that life that's underneath the soil, that is the kind of the bootstrap for that, the creation, like the first phase of that is compost. So imagine you just worked in a big restaurant and you've got, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of, potato peels and stems of broccoli and, all this food, and you're a big restaurant and you just throw it into the dumpster. And it goes off to the landfill and it's in plastic bags or whatever. It's like, it's not being honored as like, we are a huge amount of resource right here. Yes, it's a waste stream for the restaurant, but it's a huge value. It's gold, it's black gold. And so, but that if you take that stuff and you just like let it rot, it's going to get really smelly. It's going to release lots of its nitrogen up to the air. It's going to be a disaster. That's not how things work in nature. You don't get this huge amount of stuff like that all concentrated in one place. So to make compost, you have to mix together carbon with nitrogen and give it water, moisture, and oxygen. And if you give it moisture and oxygen and carbon and nitrogen, nature knows what to do. If somebody came out to my farm 12 years ago and did an inventory of all the microbiology that say, it's the surface of the moon, you don't have any, So I don't know where all the worms came from. I don't know where everybody that came from that's there now, but nature heals itself, And so when you take and bring together nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, water, it's going to decompose it and it's going to go through a journey and it's going to become compost. And compost is the breaking down of the organic structures that are there and decomposing them, digesting them. In the process, releasing heat and digesting them and getting them into a stable form. These humic acids and these fulvic acids, getting it into this form that you can imagine if you walked into an old growth forest and you looked underneath the all that leaves and duff and everything that's there and you smelled it. It's on the journey to become that. It's not going to become that in one day or 1 week or 1 month. It's going to, in nature, it's going to happen over a process of years. And so stuff falls in the forest every year, or if it's not the forest, let's say it's the prairies, and the grasses, grow and then they die and then they grow and they die. And it's this cycle of life, and nature is building this topsoil. It's composting all of this organic matter and carbon that's available. It's taking carbon from the air. These plants absorb all the carbon. They're like carbon vacuum cleaners, these trees and these plants, and they put it back in the soil where it belongs. And so this decomposing biological process, we talk about it where we want to learn and control and have have an impact. We talk about making compost. So I got lucky in our town where I found that there was an organic juice bar that had opened up not that long ago. And I went to them and I said, what do you do with all your vegetable scrap, all the pulp? They also make nut milk, hemp milk, cashew milk and stuff. So what do you do with all the pulp? And they go, we throw it away. I go, well, would you mind? I'll bring you a big, garbage bin and just throw it in here and we'll pick it up every day or every 2 days. Okay. And so we bring that back to our farm and we mix it with a combination mostly of shredded trees. There's power companies and there's landscaping companies and tree guys. We're in a forested part of North Carolina. And so there's a constant source of trees that get shredded. And so they drop off wood chips for us. We mix it with all of the stuff we get from the juice company. We mix it from our own vegan kitchen scraps, our agricultural waste from our farm. When we're about to cut down our okra. Our okra, the stalk of our okra at the bottom is like this thing. It's like a tree from May till now. And the okra plants are 12 feet tall, and so that happened in 4 months. That's how healthy our soil is. And so when we cut that down, we're going to put it in the shredder, and that's going to be also stuff that we mix into our compost.
Yeah.
Traditional compost piles are about, you build them with all the stuff and then you have to turn them because the oxygen gets used up. And if you want composting to happen without waiting 2 years, you need to have aerobic composting. All of the anaerobic composting biological processes are just slower. And so if you want it to happen faster, you got to get oxygen in there. So they talk about turning your compost pile. That's really labor intensive. So we built, we got a design from a company called O2compost.com. They're great people. And they taught us how to build our compost pile, which ours are 4 feet front to back, 6 feet side to side, and 4 feet tall.
Okay.
And we mix all that stuff in there, and we have a wooden bin that it all goes in, and we can take off the front wall, but we have PVC pipes with holes drilled in them down at the very bottom.
Yep.
And we have a fan at the back, and so it's on a timer. So once an hour, the timer fan comes on and it blows regular outside air, regular natural air into the bottom of our compost bin. And if we blow a little bit of air in once an hour, we're replenishing the oxygen that's getting used up by the aerobic bacteria and the aerobic decomposing processes. And so we can turn our waste into really finished compost in 60 days.
Wow.
Now, we don't use it exactly at that point unless we need to. We prefer, at that point, we take it out of the bin. We have 3 bins. We take it out of the bin and we put it in the forest and we cover it and let it kind of continue its composting. And if we can stay ahead of our needs, then by the time we use the compost, it might be a year old or 9 months old or 6 months old. And so we're constantly making compost. If the numbers work out the way that they're supposed to, and sometimes things go wrong in a farm, weather, or other factors. But if things work out right, we have about 1.5 to 2 inches of radically alive veganic compost that we can include on every one of our beds every year. So as I talked about how we are building up our soil, if I can get an extra 1 to 2 inches on each bed, it's that much taller. The compost does not have weed seeds in it because the compost gets up to high temperatures, about 150 degrees, and it stays there. Any weed seeds that are in there won't germinate anymore.
Wow. Okay.
So by adding compost to the top layer, you're not only bringing all of this amazing soil biology into your fields and all of the nutrients and all of this aliveness into your fields, you're also creating a buffer where there aren't any weeds. And so it makes the whole farming process that much more efficient. So yes, we make our own compost, and any small farm can do this. It's just a lot of really small little gardens do it with tumblers and other kind of stuff. But making your own compost, you want to make sure that it's fully digested, and so you need to read and learn about it. Yeah. I think as I look at all of these practices that we do on our farm that fall under the umbrella of regenerative farming, regenerative approaches to agriculture, each one of them added to the next one. It's like if you had a menu of like 10 different good things you could do for your soil, and you did one of them, that's great. And you did 2 of them, that's like more than twice as good as just doing one of them. But if you can do like all 10 of them, you're getting like 50 times the benefit of doing one of them.
Yeah.
And so it's just this miracle that every day I'm just so inspired by. Sure.
Yeah, I want to ask you about a piece to the puzzle that I'm just kind of curious about. So like, obviously in Asheville, we're kind of like, we try to be an environmentally friendly city, and all over the city now, beside the trash and the recycling, you see another bin for compost. And I've been noticing that a lot of places only have compost. So like yesterday I went to this food truck called the Trashy Vegan, and they only had compost instead of trash. So all their plates are compostable, all their forks, all their napkins, and of course the food. So that's the only bin to throw away your scraps is the compost. So like in my mind, I just have this question of like, how is this being used? Like, all this stuff that's compostable, is it actually going to someone's farm, or like how is all that stuff used in actual compost, or is that just kind of a trendy new thing?
Well, I would think that it's I don't know about Asheville specifically, but these are municipality questions. So a municipality says, we have these waste streams, and some of them are like dangerous waste streams. They're coming from hospitals, and some of them are just coming from food trucks, and some of them are coming from this kind of place. We have all these waste streams, and people put their trash out on the curb for the garbage truck to take away in some miracle of wherever it goes, Yeah. But municipalities have to figure that out. New York City, has to figure out, where does it all go? My guess is that Asheville as a municipality said, hey, we're getting all this stuff and we're having to put it in landfills or doing it stuff. But if we could only just sort it out a little bit, we could use it in different ways. We don't have to just have it all in one huge, messy, ugly pile. And so the stuff that's truly compostable, it falls into lots of different categories. Stuff that's compostable pretty fast versus stuff that's compostable kind of pretty slow. Yeah. And so they probably have a contractor that's taking these things and putting them into big windrows or big industrial sized composting operations. And my guess is that they sit in these composting operations for a year or 2 years, and then they have big, machines that can turn it over and so forth. And it's creating this healthy stuff. And they probably make it available for free or nearly for free to community members, and leaves will go there and all kinds of stuff will go there. And every so often you'll get a batch from there and you'll find, there's still a fork in here, or there's still something in here. Yeah. But if they're doing a pretty good job of segregating, it's about trusting your whole community. If they're doing a pretty good job of segregating, then the end result should be eligible to be used in organic farms and other places. And it's a whole lot better than taking, an unknown supply of chicken manure and, who knows, what they did to those chickens and what's mixed in with that manure, and then applying that to your organic farm. That's one of the biggest challenges of organic farms, is to get fertility in a way that meets the requirements, but, meets their own personal, ethics and their own personal code, and our entire kind of in commercial organic production world out there that's producing all of the organic food that's labeled organic, or most of it, that's in all the big box stores and all that stuff. They look at like this big industrial ag waste animal farm as like, yeah, give it to me. I'm allowed to use it on my fields. And, and that's why every so often we have these terrible, salmonella poisoning coming from an organic spinach farm and stuff like that. Oh. It's because all that stuff can be used out there. Wow. Yeah. So, know your farmer is like really, profound. Because, just because the label says it's organic, you can feel better about it than it was commercial. But, if we had a label that said regenerative, or veganic, or, grown in healthy soils, how do you get there? Well, consumers need to, dig in. And I think a lot of the regenerative supply chains and a lot of the ability to communicate with consumers, if we could like look forward 2 years from now or 5 years from now, I think especially, everyone who's in their teens and 20s right now and even into their 30s, they're going to demand this. And we are going to be able to say, when I eat that apple, I know how that soil was handled. And we're going to reward the farmers that are, doing it in a way that's better for the environment and better for the consumers. Yeah, that's the world I want to live in. And I was actually going to ask you about that, because you talked about like this, basically you're giving us this overview of a more holistic system, right? And you were talking about how these major corporations, they're real single-minded, it's all about the money that's coming in, how they can make money as much as possible, as quick as possible. And the holistic part of it gets left out. But you were also pretty optimistic about saying like, hey, maybe we can change this. And I want to just talk to you about like, how do we change it? Is it through farms like you, like supporting farms that are more holistic? I mean, obviously that's a piece of it. But how do we change these major corporations into thinking more holistically as well? I think I really do think it's happening. And I think work by Green America and by Kiss the Ground and by, a dozen other really amazing nonprofits and, new forms of capitalism, that are emerging, more ethical capitalism. I think we're in the right path, but we're right now at this like junction point of, evil and goodness, and this transformative, time that we're in, not only is it COVID and social unrest and political upheaval and social, like the social dilemma of, if you saw that documentary, what the professor from Harvard referred to as surveillance capitalism. There's all of this stuff going on that's like, what's the future going to be? Is it, Is it going to be this or this, But I'm really optimistic that I think good things are emerging in a quick and profound way. And as an example, this philosophy of looking at a plant as a engine, or looking at an animal as an engine to create a product, and not looking at them as, part of our, ecosystem and part of our community. When you look at a plant as an engine, then what comes out of that is big, massive greenhouses with drip tubes of IV solutions that drip onto roots, the chemistry, and then they come in there and they harvest the pepper or the strawberry or the lettuce or the kale or whatever. Yeah, if you think about like all these organic baby greens out there, the organic baby greens industry is a huge takeover happening by these chemistry drip worlds. And, these baby greens don't taste the same and they're not the same nutrients. And if the best practices of the schools that are teaching this say, you don't need to have any of this in there and you'll still get the same amount of pounds out, but this that they're leaving out is actually really important for, human health, then it's not going to be part of our human health. It's no longer this biologically whole world. It's this very reductionist chemistry thing. But it's really about the activism, of revealing, of showing the world. And, the work that, podcasts like yours are doing is really about communicating and showing the world what's going on. And one of them, you can research some, a fabulous place is a group called the Real Organic Project.
Okay.
And from one of their emails, I learned about one thing that's happening in Florida in the blueberry industry.
Yeah.
So last year, I guess we're coming up on 2 years ago, the National Organic Standards Board that controls that little label that says USDA organic in the supermarket, they changed from what they had originally agreed to in the 80s and 90s, as it was all coming into existence. They changed 2 years ago and said, you can put that organic label on hydroponically grown food. You can put that organic label on more stuff. But in particular, they allowed hydroponics, so things that are grown without soil.
Yeah.
So by doing that, they changed the whole economics of how businesses look at stuff. And they didn't do it accidentally. They did it because huge corporate lobbyists said it's too expensive to grow food organically with soil. We can grow it with less risk, more reliability if we don't have to use soil. So one of the very big investments that happened right immediately at that time were these huge blueberry farms down in Florida. And so what they did is they went and got let's say 20 acres or 30 acres of land, and they'd go in and they'd destroy it. They would get rid of everything that's there and make it basically into a huge Walmart parking lot. And they'd come in with big pounding machines to pound it into almost cement. They took away whatever topsoil was there to use it for, sell it as an asset or something. And they basically turned these huge, huge areas into wastelands. Then they completely drenched them with Roundup and all kinds of chemicals so that nothing would ever grow there. And then they roll out plastic fabric, and then they bring in 2-year-old blueberry plants that are growing in non-soil medium. And they put them out there, a certain number of inches apart with a drip tape tube going from bucket to bucket. And it's a huge parking lot full of these plants, and they're all monitored. The amount of nutrition they get, the amount of water they get, they're all monitored. And then they send out, because everything is spaced just exactly right, they can harvest it in a more automated fashion. They can do all this stuff. So it's very efficient. And they were certified organic. And they got certified organic because of a loophole. The plants weren't there when they put down all the chemicals. The plants came in a week later.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, how they sprayed all that Roundup and still were organic. That doesn't even make sense.
Right. And so now the blueberry industry of organic blueberries is being taken over. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's something vast. 80-90% of all the organic blueberries are grown in this way in just 2 years. And they are not putting them into the supermarkets with just blueberries in a thing with a USDA organic label. They're not being honest saying grown in a hydroponic world or anything like that. They have beautiful 60s illustrations on their brand name, and they go under the name Hippie Organic Blueberries, Wish Organic Blueberries with little angels and unicorns. And so the consumer goes in and they're tricked by branding, and they see the organic label and the price is cheap, and cheap prices sell. So you see this emergence, but it's kind of like this crisis. It's like the evil actors have come so strong and so deliberate and so fast and powerful, and they're meeting the forces of climate change, social change, COVID, and local sustainability and breaking of supply chains and all of these things that are being revealed to us. And we have this battle between authoritarianism and big corporatism and this new emergence. So I feel very blessed to be even know about any of this stuff. And I just got lucky that 12 years ago I felt the calling to learn about soil and to start this thing. And now, I'm inspired every day by whether it's a new documentary or a new conversation I have with, somebody like you, or, I sit in on a panel that's, doing some incredible stuff. There's some large corporations that are really doing great things as far as connecting down to how was the soil treated to eventually lead to this organic beer. How was the soil treated that's now leading to my plant-based ice cream? And one of the companies that's been around for a while is called 1 Degree Organics.
Yeah, I just learned about them.
Yeah, they're great.
Very cool.
So I am inspired, even though, you can certainly offer your attention to the, incredible, badness that's taking place. And you can't pretend it's not there, but I just feel like there's an awakening that's like really, really profound economically, socially. The freedom that comes from, different currency models. I think there's going to be a lot of really good new stuff that shows up soon.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think there's definitely a shift happening, and having these conversations is a big part of it, and having knowledge like what you're giving us right now is a huge part of it. So thank you for giving us this knowledge. I have another question for you. This one is about food insecurity. So I was wondering, can local farms help address food insecurity in their area? And if so, how?
Well, I think that COVID has really demonstrated that. I know that supply chains are back in different ways, but the local small farms in every community are being really brought to the focus. And whether it's a community making a commitment to a farmer's market, community-supported agriculture, whether it's single farms or multi-farms, they can provide, as long as there's enough land close by, they can provide, healthy, good food for the community. But, can you do vegetables efficiently and compete with the price points of those that aren't doing regenerative practices? That's really what it comes down to. Yeah. And so the farms that are not doing that, and there may be really wonderful, small family farms that have 100 acres of, sweet potatoes or 100 acres of bell peppers, and they try their best. And, at the end of the day, they're really not taking care of their soil all that good, and they're really not taking care of their people all that well. But they know that they have to be able to sell in, to the wholesale supply chain and not go out of business. And so small farms do their best. Smaller farms tend to have more flexibility so that consumers can know who they are. And if direct to consumer is the model, then the farmer, instead of in the wholesale chain getting 7 cents of the final sale, or in to a direct restaurant, they might get 20 cents of the final sale. It's like if the farmer can start getting 60, 70 cents of the final sale, and the other going to the community development, whether it's through farmers markets, co-op distributions, things like that, then in areas where there are farmers, then they can very quickly support their community. In areas where there aren't farmers, then you can create an economic model so that the urban farmers or the other kind of small market farmers can thrive. But for a farmer to thrive and make enough money to cover their expenses and pay for a fair living wage to all the people that are involved, take into account that I'm not asking my soil to do more than it should. If you ask your soil to produce, 10,000 pounds of food in this small little area, well, that's 10,000 pounds of what was nutrients in your soil that's gone. And the people aren't, coming back with their poop and putting it back in the soil. All those nutrients are gone. And so if you're going to give your soil a chance to recover from taking that away, you have to bring in these, natural compost. You have to grow green cover crops. And that means that you have to honor that portion of time is not growing food for sale. So I need more land to grow the same amount of food healthy. If I want to grow the same amount of food in a smaller amount of land, then we have to acknowledge that we're bringing in extractive practices, whether it's mining, minerals and all of these other things, plus the carbon footprint to bring them to your soil, to bring them in. If you can somehow replenish your soil by honoring the time, nature has a time frame that is thoughtful, and also bringing back your materials from within close proximity, whether it's waste from, forestry or something else, leaves. If you can rebuild your organic matter by not being in a rush, you need to have customers that say, that's valuable to me. That's important to me. That 79 cents a pound tomato at the supermarket, I cannot compare this tomato against the 79 cents. I can't say, well, this one is $3 and that's the wrong price. Or this one's $5 a pound and that's the wrong price. It's the community has to value the work that's being done for the soil, for the carbon, for everything.
Sure. And then for people who live like in food deserts and who are like, having trouble finding any healthy food, is there any way to connect farmers like yourself and people like that? Like, obviously that's an ideal world and we're not exactly there yet, but do you think we can get to a place like that eventually?
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm more familiar with Chicago than other places, but there's a lot of community activism, especially in the impoverished food desert areas, where the community comes together and the local political councilman or whoever, you say, look, here are 10 abandoned, lots. Make them available, whether it's church groups or community groups for them to grow food. And then, yes, they don't have the luxury of, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years building their soil, but they can really create enormously healthy soil quickly by bringing it in, by bringing in compost, by bringing in raised beds and stuff. There's another documentary that your listeners can log in and find. It's called The Need to Grow.
Okay.
And it only came out recently. I know the Food Revolution was part of getting it public, and so you can find it through them, and they want you to sign up for the Food Revolution and things like that. But this documentary followed a particular guy, I think it was in Sacramento, who was in a food desert and was growing food, in exactly this model. And he was using biochar and he was using compost and vermiculture for worms, and he was growing radically, amazingly healthy food for his community and doing it in a way that was his passion and the people that worked for him's passion, and people felt really engaged. And then he lost his land because the city took it away,
Wow.
And so, it's this journey, but I really think it comes down to local community activism, the same forces that are looking at the economics and the politics and the awakening power of the vote, to really change the community. So it doesn't have to be vast amounts of land. There are such good techniques that are well understood how to do it in a really small area. But you have to keep replenishing the nutrients. I wanted to take the approach of I'm going to leave my soil undisturbed for the long haul.
Yeah. And it's crazy too, like you were saying, because I have heard that in a lot of cities they're doing that. They're taking these lots and they're turning them into gardens, really nice urban gardens. And it's actually it'll feed the people for a couple years, but then it actually will fuel gentrification too, because they've made these old plots of, these what used to be an abandoned lot. They've turned it into a nice garden, and all of a sudden the community's looking better and feeling better, and then the prices go up. So it's like this crazy double-edged sword or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of double-edged swords out there.
Yeah. But that is a great answer, though. Like on the local level, we have to start thinking like this. We have to start growing our own food. And that's kind of like what we're pushing for with Wake and Justice right now. We're pushing for stronger communities through food and getting back to growing our own food. Yeah, your farm is like a really inspirational story for me and for, I'm sure, for the people listening. So my last question for you is like, have you noticed a difference in your area, in your community with you coming in and having these regenerative practices and these more holistic methods? Has that been rubbing off?
We do little, there's farm tours and stuff that come and visit us, and people are always very enthusiastic and very supportive. Yeah. And I like to bring in the high school science classes, like the AP Bio and AP Environmental Science classes, and bring those students over and show them what we're doing. But I think in each community, it's not just the farm, it's the distribution of knowledge and the distribution of like, how does this food get to people? That's the area that I think over the next few years, I want to get a lot better at, so that, we have, whether it's 50 families or 100 families, that we have a relationship with. It's a community. It's not just like a person that happened to buy something, but that it really grows to a healthy community, because each one of those people is now a little star for their circles.
Exactly.
So we have, it's called Sandhills Farm to Table. It's a multi-farm CSA model that is supported by the community. It was started about 10, 12 years ago. And they provide kind of a connectivity between families and small, 10, 20, 30, 40 acre farms that contribute in food each week. And then they have a volunteer staff that comes and packages the food up into boxes. And then they have volunteers that have, like pickup sites where people can come and pick up their food. And they do, as each year is a little different, but, 6, 7, 800, 900 boxes a week that, families are picking up and so forth. Those kinds of real impact in communities in a census kind of way, in like enough people kind of way. You can't do it with a small, tiny farm like mine. You need to have bigger farms. So like each year I contribute like, say, okra into their box for like 1 or 2 weeks, or, sweet potatoes or garlic, because I can't grow enough of any one thing because I'm growing so many things. So there's this side of me that loves what I'm doing. Yep. But it's like we're a little mushroom, we're like a little sprout that's out there. And perhaps our role is really to inspire other sprouts. So there's 1,000 of small farms, and maybe some of them will be 5 acres or 10 acres, and some of them might be 1 acre or half an acre. But each one of them has their own journey. And for me, the thing that I want to kind of inspire people for is that you can do it all veganically. You do not have to be dependent upon some source of waste from an animal stream. And if we are not taking those animal waste streams into our soil, into our food, I think our food is healthier. It's certainly less risk, and you're not supporting those processes that are creating that chicken manure for you or whatever.
Exactly.
So I want to show people that you can do it veganically. That there's best practices that can be learned. And then the other thing is that I want to show people that even though I'm not growing as much food per acre, let's say, or per, that another farm might grow, that there's something positive that comes out of that in the relationship with the soil, the health, and the relationship of the community. And so there's something positive that comes there. And so if I can only grow half as much food, I'm not saying that I can charge twice as much for it and so still be able to, have the same amount of income and expenses, but there's still something mystical about the connections of human beings and community, kind of like the connections of the mycelium fabric under the ground that we don't exactly know. And by building community, your community is more resilient and more appreciative. And that kind of positiveness, is going to help us in our next little journey.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right on.
So I wanted to tell you about, as a final thing, there's this new currency that is being developed now that is getting ready to perhaps change the landscape of how regenerative economies can work, communities, soils, and the currency is called a seed. So seeds, and you can learn about it in the website is right now is available. It's called joinseeds.com.
Okay.
And it's really connected to community, to regenerative practices, and to building kind of the relationship and the role that the economy plays in what we want to create in our world. So maybe it's a year out where it's going to be like, at every farmer's market you go to, you'll just, click on your phone and you'll buy your tomatoes and your apples and your peppers with seeds in a free transaction where there's no banking system standing in between and no, losses. And it's all transparent. And I find it really an inspired new creation of civilization that can be showing up now. So,
Very cool.
yeah, I'd say with each passing month, it's becoming more and more and more real.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go, I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast today. It's been super informative. Before we go, can you just give the people like your website, your social media info so they know where to find you?
Our website, which you can contact us and sign up for the newsletter, is called www.flow. It's spelled F as in Frank, L-O-W, flow.farm. And we haven't been keeping our website or our Facebook stuff up to date, or Instagram. We've just been too busy with so many other things. But we do get, when people contact us through there, we do reply. And hopefully next year we'll be able to, have a little bit more attention on keeping the communication going out as much as I'd like.
Okay, very cool. Mm-hmm. So are you open to, if there's listeners out there that want to reach out to you about learning more about like maybe biochar or like just these regenerative methods, are you open to having them contact you?
Absolutely. On the website, you can there's a contact us, and you just type in there and then I'll get back to you. You can also do it on Facebook, but I don't actually go on Facebook anywhere near as much. So if you just go to the website and type in the little contact, say hello, and then we'll get back to you.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the show today, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, I love the stuff that you're doing, and I love the whole generation of energy that you're the ones that are gonna make all this work. I appreciate it.
We're learning from the best, so thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, bye.
All right, see ya. Yo, thanks for listening to the podcast today. If you're currently involved in a local project that strengthens the links in your local food supply chain, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at info@wakingjustice.org and tell us about your work. And if you want to learn more about local revolutionaries making evolutionary change in their communities, find us on your favorite podcast platform, or head on over to wakingjustice.org to meet the team, check out more episodes, and learn more about the project. And to become a financial supporter of this podcast and to gain access to members-only content, visit patreon.com/wakingjustice. And remember, the real revolution builds self-reliance and community resilience. That's why the real revolution is a local revolt.
You must be involved in the struggle for freedom and justice.
If it's about love, if it's about justice is waking, justice is rising, justice is waking, justice is rising, if it's about love, justice is rising, and it ain't just us, it's all of us. Justice is waking, justice is rising, and it ain't just us, it's all of us. If it's about love, may every soul unite, tend the fire and let old coals relight. I'm a citizen of the world, and we fight for the rights of everybody to live a truly free life. Red or yellow, black or white, left or right, gay or straight, human or animal, all life. Cause what matters is what is in common. If you know it, stand tall and keep dropping the knowledge. Justice is waking, justice is rising, and it ain't just us, it's all of us. If it's about love.